narrowing it down or simplifying it, essentially, it's like reconnecting to the stories that I had about my experience, whether it's from early childhood or as recent as today, and like examining, okay, I'm upset about that. I have a fear that developed or a hurt space. What is the story connected to that? Right. So if it's my parents didn't, connect to me in the way that I wanted to, right? Like really allowing myself to reevaluate those experiences and maybe, step into their shoes a bit and really understand, okay, maybe they don't even have the capacity for that because they've been hurt themselves. And as I started, connecting to the stories themselves, I realized I can use any experience as the point of hurt, growth, love, or it can be neutral, and it's really up to me. So once I realized that I had that power, I decided I wanted to reclaim it as often as I could.
Love that. And I really appreciate you giving your parents, for example, that humanity. I think oftentimes it can be easy to villainize where our parents have gone wrong in the past, but pulling back to be able to acknowledge them as human beings and children at one point and doing the best that they can with what they know, essentially. And that's so empowering to get us out of a victimhood state. Is there anything that happened, in your past that was particularly huge that you had to navigate? I feel like you've talked a little bit about religious trauma or anything like that. What's coming up around that?
Yeah. So with religious trauma, particularly, my dad's a third, fourth generation, Baptist preacher, and that's a very strong spiritual tradition in my family. And so, along with that, though, comes a lot of rigid, supposed tos and have tos, and this is the right way, that's the wrong way. And so, for me, growing up in a big family, I have seven siblings, and I'm number seven of eight kids. So, I saw a lot of, harsh punishment and harsh judgment and harsh critique, while also having my own versions of that. So as I was navigating, like just trying to, not end up in the crosshairs of religious judgment, I slowly began to betray myself. And so how that showed up for me is um, I was sharing with some of the beautiful souls who came to the retreat that we had in Oregon a couple of months ago, that I was always asking myself as a kid, when is it my turn to speak? When is it my turn to speak? Because there was so much happening, so many big personalities, and it wasn't until somewhere as an adult in my mid 20s that I realized, like, oh, I don't actually have to ask for permission, but that was one of the ways that those traumas kind of showed up for me and really squelched a lot of my individual expression. So, navigating a lot of the things that I think we all will either resonate with or have extreme dissonance with about around, Christianity or other spiritual beliefs. For myself, when I got down to who I really was, um, it was, I think that spirituality is bigger than any one religion. And as I studied many other teachings and beliefs and modalities, I realized that it's all one thing, and we all have so many ways that really resonate to us for various reasons. And I think it's just important that we find what is true for us, you know um, and that's kind of the journey, navigating what's true for me while also respecting what's true for another if we don't agree.
Absolutely. And I feel like what you're describing in your experience is probably what a lot of youngest siblings can relate to, or anybody that's ever felt a sense of otherness and feeling like they have to wait and to take up space. And that can show up in so many different ways. So, what became like a turning point? If you can think back to it, was there a turning point where you were like, okay, I'm going to start to reclaim my power here and start to study some new modalities and start to get curious about the universe, etc. Can you remember a point where things started to change for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was fairly gradual, but I would say around my mid 20s, you know, I'd been in that tradition for a long time, but my personal bubble had expanded, and so many of um, the things that I had believed at that point were just proven wrong for me. And as I began to allow myself to experience other things, I realized that so much of what I believed about the world was secondhand information. And what I mean by that is it's like I don't there's two definitions for knowledge. And the first is essentially information, right? You read a book, you have the information about a certain area of the world, whatever the book's about. But the second definition is talking about familiarity with a certain experience, right? With facts associated with an experience. And I think so many of us get have a certain fear around our, whether it's belief structures or traumatic events in our lives, that we don't allow ourselves new experiences. And even if we're in new spaces, actually, you know, allowing our mind and awareness to be in a new space with things. So once I found meditation, I was 25. I remember the first time I meditated. I didn't know what I was doing. It was just intuitive. And I was like, okay, I went to YouTube, found, you know, some meditation music. And I sat down in a corner of my room and I just had this extremely lucid experience where I felt connected to everything, but I also felt like I wasn't anything in particular. And there was extreme love and grace and compassion in that space. And I just remembered, like, kind of, it was like an hour later, I came out of like this very powerful experience. I didn't know what was happening. It was like, okay, there's something here for me. But I just had this extreme knowing that what's important about spirituality is really having the space to actually have firsthand knowledge, like creating a space within to go, okay, I had an experience with this individual that was harmful or hurtful. How can I continue to create each moment new, right? The beginner's mind. And I think that is the real gift. That's what really shifted things for me. Because when I can actually refresh, literally reboot or reset my awareness and detach and connect to impermanence, then there's less to be weighed down by. But I think that that takes a lot of intentional practice and you know, continued um, humility on a certain level to recognize, like, we don't know everything and never will we.
Such a potent way of describing knowledge. First of all, I just want to repeat that familiarity through experience or with experience. I've never heard it phrased like that. That really resonates. Love that. And then it sounds like what you're talking about too is like releasing the attachment to the outcome. And like you were saying earlier, releasing the narrative and the story that has been running through your head and starting to rewrite that story. That feels like a weight getting lifted off your shoulders in a way when you start to release that attachment to outcome. And it's amazing because I know you've had so much, you know, success with music and in the wellness and the spiritual world. So how did your spiritual practices, or, you know, what would have contributed to your success in both music and then eventually in the healing space as well? Like, what comes to mind practice wise, or what did you bring in for kind of pillars of success there?
You know, to be very transparent, I wasn't necessarily chasing success as, you know, I think we kind of all generally understand it. It was very much what I'm mentioning now. It was surrender. It was letting go of like these close grips on this is what it should be, right? And so for me, I think a long time as a musician, because that's what I've been most of my life, at least as a vocation. Um, it's like you look at this guitar player, this singer, or this songwriter, and you go, oh, this is what good music should sound like, right? Or that's what great playing or singing or whatever it may be. And so you start to model yourself after that. But it's a thing where I realized that at a certain point, okay, it's wonderful to learn through the lens of this is what music sounds like through this artist or that creator. But once I started connecting to meditation, there's a book called Effortless Mastery. It's by a jazz pianist named Kenny Warner. I think he teaches in Berkeley. He's very well accomplished, but I love that he combined mindfulness with music. And his general philosophy is essentially that as we create, everything should be as effortless as breathing. So everything else on this planet, right? Trees, the other animals, mammals, are all just being what they are created to be. We're the only ones like walking around like, am I worthy? Am I good enough? In one way or another, like trying to gain some sense of value out of others, the validation of others. And so there's a beautiful practice. And one of the meditations says, imagine you're at Carnegie Hall. It's a packed house. The most beautiful music ever is playing, and you're not doing anything. You're just breathing, right? And you're just enjoying it right there along with the crowd. And, the first time I did that meditation, I was like, is this guy all right? Like, I don't know I didn't know what he was trying and 3 months into the practice, I had a moment at a gig. It's probably like 10 years ago now, and I actually felt that feeling. Like I felt like everything was just doing its thing. I was just breathing. And I learned like you practice certain space to be in a state of flow, and then trust what you know, trust what you've learned, trust what you practiced, and allow it to flow through you, unattached to the outcome, unattached, without judgment, without need for it to be quote unquote perfect, because it already is, right? And from that space, things just happened. I mean, I connected to one of my favorite artists ever, and she found me. But they were always connected to these moments where I was really in that space, this state of flow. So, I really attribute it all to being in a state of flow, of just trusting. And I am a firm believer in, we attract on whatever frequency we're on. And so when I begin to love myself and approve of myself enough to not need change it or, mold it to be like any others, then I found those who resonated with that.